Hey, Steve Saretsky here. As always, there's a blog post that goes with this video, so that's in the description below. I just want to touch on the big news yesterday with the BC NDP and then the Green Party basically teaming up to form our new government to get rid of Christy Clark. So it looks like after 16 years, she's essentially done, and then we'll have a new government coming in. So I mean that has pretty big implications for the housing market. Particularly both these parties had very aggressive housing affordability policies that were essentially geared towards cooling down the market and that sort of thing. So that's one thing that I'm really looking at in terms of. Again, I've had a lot of conversations with the NDP's David Eby, trying to get his perspective on things and, where they see the market again. So what I'm going to want to do is I want to touch on both these parties' sort of platforms leading into the election, their sort of stance on it, and, really just where we're at and what this means for the Vancouver real estate market moving forward. So, essentially, as I've talked about again, obviously the BC Liberals have put a huge emphasis, a huge focus on the real estate market. It's been very good for realtors such as myself, developers, that sort of thing. And obviously there's been a lot of political donations and there's been a lot of scrutiny about it. And essentially we've built an economy. So everybody wants to talk about BC's economy and how strong it is and the job creation, etc. But essentially, again, there's been so much emphasis put onto residential real estate, the construction that comes out of there, lawyer, conveyancing, mortgage brokers, etc., where it makes up it's close to 25% of GDP in BC. So, it's a really unsustainable, unhealthy amount. So, with that being said, there's now with this new government coming in, I don't know if there's going to be a change from that. It seems hard when your economy is so predicated on real estate to start to intervene and change policies. And again, it's a very, very fine thing where as soon as you start to fine-tune things and bring in new policies, it could have severe unintended consequences. But again, everyone, I don't like to get political. I think that the markets always tend to work themselves out. Whoever's in power, it doesn't really matter. Markets will play out how they're going to play out. Certainly governments can come in there and expedite the process, etc. But so that's just something I look at. Again, these two parties had very aggressive housing affordability platforms in the election, and it's something that I'm looking at. So basically, to summarize, the BC Greens, some of their policies that they were had forth on the table was a 30% foreign buyers tax province-wide. So obviously that would be a substantial jump, 30% province-wide. They had a crackdown on illicit money coming into the country. They had a sliding scale of property transfer tax. They wanted to up it to a 12% property transfer tax, which is absolutely massive on properties above $3 million. And it would be a sliding scale. I think they were going to drop the property transfer tax for properties below, I think it was 700,000. So the property transfer tax would get lower. Then basically, anything above, I think it was $3 million, would be a 12% property transfer tax. That was another big one of them. And then they were actually looking at a capital gains tax for residences that make a capital gains and they buy and sell within 5 years. So I guess it's sort of targeted towards speculators that are buying and flipping and selling within 1 to 2 or 3 years. They're going to tax your capital gains up to a gain of $750,000 if you buy and sell within 5 years. So I think those are the Greens' sort of big three that they were targeting in their housing platform. Obviously it's one thing to talk about them and another thing to actually implement them. And then on the other side, the NDP, which I think, if I had to guess, I would say the policies that try to get enacted will probably lean much more towards the NDP. Obviously, with them having the balance of the power, the majority of much more seats than the Greens. But we're kind of gonna have to see where these two sides sort of meet to form their housing platforms. But again, this is sort of pre-election. The BC NDP their big one was they were going to set up, first of all, a task force to start to track down illicit money, these numbered corporations, etc., that are basically laundering money in BC. That was the big one. They were going to close the loophole on the foreign buyers tax in pre-sale condos. Again, I'm not sure how they would even go about implementing that. I don't think it's as cut and dry as one would think, because again, nothing's actually registering in land titles. But they were going to close that loophole for pre-sale condos. They're going to charge the 15% tax there. And then I guess the biggest one that they were looking at, again, speaking with David Eby, I'm going to link his video in the interviewed with him right here, so you can watch that. And they were looking at a 2% property surcharge tax every single year to homeowners that don't pay income taxes in BC. So I guess their big premise with the foreign buyers tax is essentially it doesn't actually, it sort of targets people's passports or citizenship. It doesn't actually go after, where, it doesn't actually track where the money's coming from. So again, a lot of these people have, citizenship or PR, or it's under corporations, it's going under the wife or daughter, and the husband earns money overseas, etc., right? So their big issue is they're looking at a 2% property surcharge tax. So essentially, if you do not declare BC income tax, you don't pay BC income taxes, then they're going to charge you 2% each and every year of your property's value. So that's a massive one. I know that, again, talking with David Eby, the NDP's likely housing minister, is that the sentiment in the Chinese community was they did not like it one bit. Again, it's an annual tax coming in at 2% of your property's value, so you can see if it's $2-3 million properties can get way up there. So that was the big one, and that was actually the suggestion. That was a study. They're implementing that 2% off the study that was initially proposed from UBC Sauder, from I think 20 or 30 economists that had basically gotten together and proposed this surcharge tax. I think they actually initially tabled a 1.5% surcharge tax, but the NDP said no, we're going to go 2%, and that was on their housing platform. So I think between these two policies, between these two housing platforms, the NDP and the Greens, they're obviously very aggressive. They target housing affordability in Vancouver. Obviously, if some of these are implemented, we don't know which ones, but I think if any of them really are implemented to any degree and actually, policed, then it could certainly have a substantial cooling effect on the market. It's still too early. It's obviously all speculation. I think the biggest thing, as we all know, is politicians, quite frankly, are full of empty promises, and a lot of the stuff that they talk about never actually gets implemented. So we're gonna have to sort of wait and see. Like I said, the economy is extremely fragile when you have, it's essentially a one-trick pony. I mean, the BC economy, the Vancouver economy, particularly, it is dependent on Vancouver real estate. It is the driver. It really is the driver of the entire Canadian economy. It's right now you basically have Ontario and Vancouver real estate propelling things. So anytime that you have a provincial government coming in and saying we're going to start cooling things down, they're going to start to tinker with things. You're walking a very, very fine line. So it'll be interesting to see how much of these policies that they're talking about actually get implemented. So that's something that I'll be looking forward to, seeing how these things play out. It's much too early to say, what's going to happen, how it's going to happen, because again, although these are very aggressive policies, we don't know if they're actually going to get implemented and that sort of thing. So I think we should have probably a better idea, and sometime in June, I think that's when the Christy Clark's going back to government to try to plead her case. But it looks like it's all but over for her, and we'll have the NDP in charge with the Greens sort of backing them, and then so we'll have to see what kind of policies these two groups end up forming with their housing affordability, etc. So anyways, hope that helped. If you want more information, again, check out the blog. I've got both the parties' housing platforms in detail there, and yeah, talk to you soon.